are you? Well, first, happy Blue Friday. Thank you for being here. On Wednesday, during my oath of office ceremony, I stated that I did not see my role as mayor as that of a caretaker. You know, I didn't have to move from the second floor to the seventh floor to learn new things about this city. But what it has done is allowed me to see what kind of executive action can be taken when one is actually willing to sort of step up loudly and boldly and say, this needs to be done. A few minutes ago, I signed an executive order 201706, which first directs the Seattle Office of Economic Development to respond directly to Amazon's request for a proposal for its second headquarters to be located right here in Seattle. By October 19th, we will have our response. I've met with Amazon executives. I've spoken with the Governor Inslee about this, and I'll chat a little bit about that in a second. Quite candidly, if there are to be an additional 50,000 jobs, from warehouse workers to software engineers, they should be for our residents. You saw the response from cities, over 100 cities across the country. But we need to do everything we can possibly to make sure that we have the kind of environment that will be conducive to that kind of health, that kind of economic health and growth. I'm directing the city to work collaboratively with the University of Washington, as an example, who in itself is a large employer and real estate owner, and to work with other major employers who have the opportunity to work with us and respond to this RFP. Again, Governor Inslee and members of his team and Amazon representatives, we all understood one thing in common, that now is not the time to bash employees who have families, who attend our schools, who are part of our community. Now is the time to explore all alternatives to make sure we keep those jobs here. Having said that, I talked about this was an opportunity. I'm directing our city to closely examine our city strategy to not only retain many of our large employers, but also establish a clear business retention strategy. This kind of issue really should not happen again. Our strategies must be aligned with our values, and we do value jobs. Now, as a former Teamster and union member, I got to make something very clear. Labor is not the enemy. I believe a strong and collaborative relationship with labor can, in fact, be the key to our success. So in developing these business retention strategies, the voice of labor should and must be at the table. I reached out to friends of labor such as Nicole Grant and David Rolfe, and Dave and I had a great conversation about this strategy. And they too are creative and innovative. And they too understand ways to develop economic development. What I said Wednesday was, our job as civic leaders is to set the stage for excellence. And that's what the first executive order does. I signed another executive order, second executive order 201708, which addresses the King County Children and Family Justice Center, otherwise known as the Youth Jail. And so I met with the cabinet members that said, and described this executive order. They said, Mayor Harrell, you're going there? I said, yes, we're going there, because I said we won't dodge the difficult issues. As many of you know, the county is en route to build a $210 million facility on 14th Avenue and East Alder Street. The voters approved this, and I think we all could agree that both the air quality and the water quality and the seismic protections of that facility are horrendous. The county currently plans to reduce the bed count from 212 to 112 bed facility, and I'm joined here by my good friend and strong leader, King County Councilman Rod Dembowski. He wears a nice suit too, by the way. And he and I have been asking a very simple and fundamental question about that construction. If we knew in 2012 what we know about right now in terms of mass incarceration, racial disparities in our judicial system, if we knew about the quote unquote war on drugs, how it devastates communities of color, if we knew about the abuses of prosecutorial discretion and historical and institutional racism, would we consider a different approach? And as mayor, I would say yes. Both the city and the county have embraced a zero use of detention policy. And I have to make something clear, that doesn't mean, And I am proud that both the city and county embrace this policy. That doesn't mean that we don't understand that some kids commit heinous acts and need to be in custody. It says that it's not natural for kids to commit heinous acts. And if these kids commit heinous acts, there was a breakdown along the system somewhere. And so this approach says we have to look at the systems first and the breakdown in the child second. Dr. Troupin recently wrote, I was tasked to look at the youth jail, and I've had a great conversation with King County Executive Dow Constantine today, and there's much written about what the new facility should look like. But to that end, I've said that the city has to put some skin in the game. We can't sit back here and criticize. I'm convinced that both members of the county and the King County Executive understand this issue of racial disparity in the judicial system. But I'm directing that our city partner with the county to look at what facilities and housing we can lease to build our facilities, to provide these services to our youth. Dr. Troupin, again, a noted expert in this area, says that international, I'm quoting here, international and national juvenile detention centers are increasingly moving away from an architectural model of large institutionalized facilities in favor of smaller, normalized environments, an approach consistent with restorative justice design principles. Now, I got to make something clear about these facilities. Many of them may be south of Seattle. Many of the problems we are facing in Seattle are with youth who are committing bad acts in Seattle, but they don't live in Seattle. They sometimes live in Renton and Federal Way and Tukwila and different areas outside of the city. That's just the truth of the matter. But as Dr. Troupin noted, many of these kids are walking around with untreated trauma and very little support systems. So King County Executive Dow Constantine and have had this chat with today, and King County Councilmember Rod Dembowski and I have been talking about this for a while. Now is the time for the city again to put some skin in the game. So the executive order will do precisely that. Third, and I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble when I say this, but at least I have my family around when I say something like this. Our city has become filthy. I was cautioned not to use that word. And I'm sure it'll be a soundbite on Twitter and other forms of social media, but as an elected official, I'm embarrassed driving and walking around some of the areas in this city. Now, one thing my wife will attest to, and it's been sort of a source of criticism for my son and I, but I'm sort of a neat freak. I like things neat and orderly, and they know that. And while we've doubled down this year through the activation of the Emergency Operations Center and budgeted more than ever to remove 6 million pounds of litter and illegally dumped waste, that's the equivalent of 333 garbage trucks. That's the work we're doing now. We have to do better. I have the utmost confidence in the director of Seattle Public Utilities, Mami Hara. She's one of the best in the nation. We should be proud to have her at the helm. So the problem is not hers. The problem is that I am concerned what the norms in Seattle and the expectations in Seattle are. So I'm saying we have to reset community norms. I've signed Executive Order 201707, which directs SPU and other city departments to identify the 10 hotspots by listening to the public. Now, whether that's city apps, social media, phone calls, or whatever means, to identify those 10 worst hotspots, and then commit by saying how quickly we will clean those spots. You reset community norms by resetting community expectations. Often these areas are not controlled by us. They're controlled by the state or other jurisdictions. So within that same time frame, how do we coordinate that with these different agencies? I used the term a couple of days ago that we are going to set the stage for excellence. You cannot set a stage for excellence if you don't clearly articulate what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. I try to live my life that way, and I think that that's what the city needs to do. Fourth, I've signed Executive Order 201705 directing our information technology departments to examine our electronic systems, including emails and backup services, to determine what vulnerabilities we have when we store and transmit information. Much of this information comes from you. The issue becomes how can we remain transparent and respond to public disclosure requests. You know, we get about 250 public disclosure requests a week. Of course, some of that's coming from the media. I'd like to thank you for that. I recently took a delegation from Kobe, Japan, to visit Microsoft's Cybersecurity Center to better understand the issues faced. I don't think a lot of people have an appreciation for how sophisticated the hackers are. That, coupled with the issues Equifax has recently faced, has resulted in, of course, multiple class actions, has prompted me to identify our system's vulnerabilities such that we can protect our residents, protect our customers, and protect your information. Executive Order 201705 requires a risk assessment and management report by November 15, 2017. So I told you Wednesday that I did not see this job as being a caretaker. And I also said that the issues facing this city are bigger than me or any position. I'm but one part of a team. So while I have a passion for excellence and boldness and a heck of a lot of energy, I've decided to decline the position of mayor for the remainder of this term and will return to the City Council and continue representing District 2. I was elected to serve the constituents of District 2, and I will continue to do so. I have lived in that district most of my life, and my children and my grandchildren who are squirreling around over there, where they live, and it is truly one of the most diverse and colorful communities in this city. I have full confidence that the council will elect a capable council member to carry out the remainder of the term. And by the way, I met with Ms. Moon and Ms. Durkin this morning with members of our transition team to make it welcoming for both candidates when one is elected. I believe they both feel very comfortable with the current transition plan pursuant to the executive order I signed 2 days ago. I would say they are both very capable leaders, of course, asking the right questions, and I'm confident that we're going to be good hands next year. Now, one last thought I'd like to share with you. A very close person to my wife and I, who we sort of call our sister, who lives in my district, told me, I believe, with love and respect, and she said, well, Bruce, she didn't call me Mayor Harrell, by the way. She said, Bruce, I heard you the other day, and she said, as a victim of abuse, I needed to hear more. I wanted to hear more. She said she believed in me and she loved me, but she needs to feel as though I understood what the allegations against the mayor brought out in her, how she felt. And she believed the city wanted to know that. So to the survivors, I hear you. It was your voice that changed the history of this city. It was your voice that changed its course and its direction. It was your voice that prompted me to ask an entire city to heal. And I've learned in life that the truth always prevails over falsity, and that justice and karma are universal laws of life. So to my sister out there, I hear you. And to all of the survivors, I hear you, and I understand. And I hope that if I see my sister or any survivors, you would receive a hug from me, because I'm a hugger. But you understand that many of us are leading not only with our mind, but with our heart, and trying to help everyone involved. I'd like to say thank you to this outstanding cabinet and executive team. One word comes to mind. That word, whatever my granddaughter said, that word comes to mind. One word comes to mind. That is awesome. They're living in uncertain times as well, but they're focused on what we must do to keep this city great. So my 4 executive orders will be filed with the clerk. They are all signed prior to this speech. If you have any questions regarding the second one I talked about, the youth jail, I've asked Councilman Rod Dembowski to be at the helm here with me to answer any questions. Again, he and I have been working several months on this issue, and I think we have an opportunity to do some great things and maybe pivot a strategy and really talk about the issue of mass incarceration. With that said, I'm free to take a few questions. I got that question. Well, Ben, I'm going to have to tell you to help me orchestrate a little bit.
Are you mixing the youth jail? Put some skin in the game. I'm not following what you're saying at all.
Let me be clear. In the executive order is a written document. You could follow through it. So what I'm saying is that to embrace the zero use of detention strategy, according to Dr. Troopin, the traditional facility does not make sense. What I'd like the city to do are to lease or build facilities. It could be close to the existing facility on 14th Avenue or outside of Seattle. We will provide services within the cities, perhaps even look at our transportation policies. An example would be our police department sometimes will take kids and take them right to the youth center. Perhaps they do not go to the youth center. Perhaps they go to a different kind of house. And I've toured the facility, and I got to tell you, it is a jail. And so if you look at Dr. Troopin's report and you really look at what best practices are, you have to have an environment that builds a family environment, a spiritual healing environment. So the city of Seattle will lease or build these facilities, which may not even be in the city of Seattle, to make sure that we are offloading some of that pressure from the county for that $210 million facility. I'm going to be even more candid. I think prior to this executive order, our approach as a city has been, with many advocates, by the way, simply saying stop building the youth jail, which was approved by the voters in 2012. Well, that facility was approved by the voters, and the city do not have direct resources into the facility itself. This executive order directs us to help with the housing and the architectural issues as well as the support services.
Are you confident that the city council will pick a mayor, and if so, do you know who it will be?
I'm very confident that the city council will pick a mayor, and I'm not going to comment on, I'm not a council member right now, so I'm not going to comment on that process, but I'm sure they may have some opinions. I do want to thank Councilmember Bagshaw, who's my dear friend, is standing here. Do you know who you're going to? No, I'm not going to. So we'll let the council take that up Monday, and I think they're going to talk about several issues Monday afternoon.
That a mayor will be designated on Monday?
Yeah, my comfort level is pretty high, but I've learned one thing in politics is that sometimes predictions could be wrong. So, they know the issues. And again, if you look at a memo that I drafted as city council president, we talked about the process, and the charter is actually silent on the time deadline. I recommended a period of time of 5 days. I chose to make this decision Friday to allow the council to make decisions over the weekend, not break the OPMA rules, by the way, but to have these dialogues and have these discussions. So I'm confident, but we'll see what happens Monday.
Mr. Mayor, would you explain more? Mr. Mayor, would you explain more about why you did not decide to continue as mayor until the election was certified and provide continuity for the next 6 weeks or so?
Leave it to Essex to ask a question that makes me pause for a minute. I said, when asked that question, a similar question Wednesday, that it may sound a little cheesy, a little corny. I don't care. I really care about this city. And there are issues on the council through the budget process that I think need my leadership. My issues in District 2 to me are always alarming. That's my home. So I looked at that, and I looked at the continuity. I talked to cabinet members. I looked at some executive orders I wanted to put in place, and I said it would make sense for me to put some of my energy in another position. And I think that was the logical decision to do, and I wanted to do it to give some people some certainty moving forward in terms of my council.
And what about on a personal basis, that decision as to whether to keep your seat or not keep your seat?
Restate your question, Essex.
Oh, what about personally? What thoughts were considered personally as to whether to keep your seat or to, for a time, be away from elected office?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I do the same thing I do, and I'm very serious. I'm joined with my wife and one of my sons here, and my daughter-in-law and my kids. I talk to them. They're used to me working hard around. So it wasn't any of those issues. We just sort of factored in and said, we think this is the right thing to do.
So why are you issuing executive orders given the short time that you're in office? Why not wait for the next mayor to make those kind of decisions?
In fact, I have a stock answer for that, Erica, because I knew that was going to be asked. What I try to make it very clear, this work needs to be done. I don't care who's on the executive. I don't care who's calling the shots. This work needs to get done. So whether I'm up here for 1 day or 1 week or 4 years, this work needs to get done. It's more important than me. So in my mind, as a person that takes action, I looked at what needs to be done. The Amazon response, as an example, that needs to get done. The youth jail work that we need to do, that needs to get done. So for me, the executive orders and their importance transcends where I physically sit. That's my passion, that's my belief.
So regardless of who takes the helm, what are the...
Are you going to endorse a mayoral candidate?
Am I going to, I'm going to stay out of that issue. Thank you very much.
Regardless of who takes the helm coming up, what do you see as the two largest issues that the city will be facing in the new term?
I'm sorry, I was, I want to turn to my friend, Councilmember Dabowski. On the youth jail, did you want to now say anything? This might be, and I'll come right back to that question. I'm going to ask you to restate. Would you like to say anything? I'm putting you on the spot, obviously.
Sure are. Just very briefly, Mr.
Please.
Mayor. To Erica's question, I give a lot of credit to the mayor. At King County, we believe in the doctrines and principles and statements of Martin Luther King, and one of the things he reminded us is the importance of acting with the fierce urgency of now. And that's what the executive order on the youth jail does. It's aimed toward a goal of zero youth detention, of providing alternatives for our judicial system and for our human services providers to do something other than the default, which is lock kids up, which we know leads 80% of the time to recidivism. And it's just been a real pleasure to work with Mayor Harrell for many months now, behind the scenes, with partners to advance this goal in a very complicated area. So I just want to express my appreciation in your work as a council member and as mayor to bend the arc of history towards justice with respect to kids in our city and county. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, repeat your question, please.
Yes, Councilor. Regardless of who takes the helm as the next mayor of the city, if you could identify, if you had to say just two of the top issues, two of the biggest issues in your mind right now for them to address when they are sworn in.
So, thanks for the question. You know, I've run for office a few times, and those kinds of questions, name your top 3 priorities, name the top 5 priorities. Quite frankly, I don't respond to those kinds of questions because in an ecosystem we call a city, they all got to work together. So if I say homelessness or housing affordability, transportation is right there. And I look at civil rights, education is right there. So I try to stress the importance of what I call, and a lot of people don't like the word ecosystem, but that's the only word that comes to mind when I think about what makes a city great. It's all of the components. And as I said on Wednesday, you know what they are. Because I'll tell you, for one person it might be environmental sustainability. For another person it might be rights of underrepresented people. For another person it might be education. We all have a separate DNA. So for the 2 candidates to prioritize just 2 things, I wouldn't speak for them, but I hope that they both embrace the notion of a whole city, a great city for all of the components working together. And I believe they will. I've had conversations with both of them, and I know both of them. So I hope that they understand that. And with that, I'll take just one more question, if that's okay. And then we have to.
And maybe you should do one more after me. Just to be totally clear that your executive order doesn't stop the county youth jail or doesn't affect that project at all. It's sort of in addition to that, the city will be building facilities.
It does not stop, but if done correctly and implemented correctly, and you know, I'm not going to get into the costs of the jail, the $210 million, or their cost issues or anything they're contending with. I believe if we do it correctly, they will relook at the design. Dr. Troopin's report was a fascinating report. It was written in August of last month, and I would encourage people to read that report because in that he really talks about what's happening in this country, what the new facility should look like, and it should get out of the pod-like structure. So if we do this right, the county may look at what they're building and pivot, and that would be the goal, again, with either ancillary contiguous housing or housing outside of the city. Remember, again, a lot of the acts of the kids are from kids that sometimes don't live in the city. I think we have to recognize the realities of our city.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.